What time is it? It's Clacky time! And welcome back. I'm Clacky. And today we're talking about the Hunger Games again. Thank you guys so much for how many of you watched my Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes reaction trailer. If you haven't seen that yet, check it out right here. It's gonna pop up on the screen and you can check that out. And that went a little bit more viral than I expected it to. And a lot of people were leaving comments and talking to me about the Hunger Games, and it got me just really fired up. I was doing a stream recently, and one of the questions a community asked was like, what's one topic that if somebody asks you, you always get fired up to talk about? And I was like, I love talking about books. But I was like, in particular, the Hunger Games. The Hunger Games, I can go off on a rant for and never stop. So that's what we're doing today. I guess I should turn this so I can sip it. We're doing a Hunger Games rant today because I only was able to lightly touch upon the other three books while mostly talking about Ballad of Songbirds and Snake in that reaction trailer. So I'm gonna get into my passion of the Hunger Games and I'm gonna just lay out all my opinions. This video will be full of spoilers, so if you have not seen the movies, if you have not read the books, I will not be going into spoilers of Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes though, because that movie's not out yet. I will touch on like things that I like about it, but I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm just going to be like, I like Coriolanus' Snow backstory, and I love learning about Lucy Baird and where she comes from and what's the point of that. I'm not talking about Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I'm talking about Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay. So let's do it. I personally have some strong opinions when it comes to the Hunger Games. I enjoyed the movies. Now, a lot of people did not like the movies and they have a lot of anger about them, and I understand that, and it comes from a point of perfectionism, I guess, in a sense. I also am the type of person who can separate content. A book is different than a movie, and sometimes a movie doesn't have to be accurate, but you can just enjoy watching it for the entertainment sake of it was just a good movie to watch. And I thought the Hunger Games movies were good movies to watch. I personally really did like the cast of the Hunger Games. Now, I could do a few tweaks here and there, but I thought all the actors just played to their roles and they did a phenomenal job. I did like Jennifer Lawrence as Katniss. I did love Josh Hutcherson as Peta, and I love Liam Hemsworth as Gale, because you're supposed to fucking hate him, and you do. You hate him. I hated him the whole time. He's attractive, but you hate him. But that's that. Finnick was perfectly cast. Perfectly cast. Phenomenal. I am a Stanley Tucci stan. He is my favorite actor. So Stanley Tucci slaughtering the role of Caesar Flickerman, hands down. One of his best roles in my personal opinion, but I also am biased and I love every Stanley Tucci role. No matter what he does, I think he's phenomenal. I'm literally blanking on her name, but the actress for Effie Trinket, she does a lot of comical roles a lot of the times. She was in Pitch Perfect and wrote that and stuff, and I love her as Effie because I'm partial to Effie, and we'll get into Effie a little bit later. But let's just start from like the beginning. So yes, I did enjoy the movies. I thought they were fun. Yes, there's some changes that I'd like to go into, and that's what today's video is about, my passion for the Hunger Games. So we're gonna start with book one, the Hunger Games. I thought it was good. It's obviously, so in order to achieve perfection with the movies to the books, the movies would have had to have been slightly longer and a much higher rating than PG-13, because of the subjects that they touch upon in the books is pretty effed up. Now, yes, they used Katniss Everdeen, Jennifer Lawrence and Josh Hutcherson and Liam Hemsworth, and they were older than the reaped age that they actually were in the books. And yes, it's meant to be disturbing because these like chubby faced children are supposed to be killing each other in the Hunger Games, and not like this romance between adult teens, and like kids are forced to kill kids and then forced into a romance as a kid. And it's supposed to be way more effed up and cruel, but I understand why they aged it up for the sake of the movies, because the ratings would have to change, and that's that. you get what you get when you get a movie adaptation, and that's one of those things where like you watch a movie and you don't need to judge every aspect of it, you just need to enjoy it for the sake that it's a movie. And what I like to do is when I watch a movie, I imagine it as I'm reading the book, and I can see the visual on screen, but I also remember what I read in the book, and I go, that's good. It's putting pictures to some of the scenes in my head, and I'm able to remember what really happened in the book, and it's nice, and I get to do both without having to reread the book every day. Some people are a little too sensitive when it comes to movies. Drives me nuts. Just enjoy something and stop being so hypercritical all the time. Okay, but I'm gonna be really hypercritical in a second. First movie, great. Fun. I think they made it really emotional. They really intense. The aspects that I really love in the development of the series is how, like, in the first movie, the camera is like shaky and grainy and the colors are dull, and as like the goes on, the camera becomes steadier and the colors brighter because she's getting better quality of recording and she's more in the spotlight, whereas like she's in District 12 and everything's just like, we don't really care, and it's meant to look poor, it's meant to look rickety, it's meant to look shitty, and it does. I think they translated it really well. I don't understand why they did what they did with the Mockingjay pin in the first movie, because people, like, I've seen so many speculations online where they're like, if you see the Mockingjay pin in the movie, and I'm like, have you ever read the books? Katniss never gives her the Mockingjay pin. That's not where that comes from. I know that they needed to cut details out in the fact that the Mockingjay pin actually comes from another girl in the book who gives it to her as she's in the room after she's been reaped, or she volunteered, but I don't know why they even bothered giving it to Rue. That's super weird because it kind of like Rue, oh my gosh, Primrose, because it's like, this will protect you, and then she gets reaped, and then it's like, well, that just what's the point? I don't know. I think that part could have just been done without. She could have just bought the pin for herself and kept it and whatever, but whatever. She got the pin. Moving on. Not a big deal, you know, easily translatable, fine. Getting to know Peta was like a little bit weird. I understand how they did everything with flashbacks, but I feel like they didn't explain the bread well. And unless you read the books or like really pieced it together, it was kind of vague about the bread thing. And I know they get to it later in the trilogy, but it's a bit weirdly written in my opinion. I'm not going to go into every scene of these movies because there's at least, I think, there's at least one scene per movie that I have a big issue with. I loved the ceremony of the parade of the tributes in the first movie. I loved the training quarters. I loved the representation of the arena, and I thought it was great. But until you get to the end of the games, that's where my issue with the first movie comes in. They did great at translating a lot of things until Katniss blows up the tributes. They have a real name. The career tributes loot pile, and that explosion is so bad that it quite literally blows her ear off and makes her deaf in one side of her ear. They just kind of like skipped it over, and they added her like having some tinnitus and a little bit of ringing, so they like kind of translated it. And I guess they didn't want to do all the blood and gore, but the fact that she loses her hearing is a very significant thing a whole book later. So they don't touch on it at all, and they just go, oh, it's just her head started hurting. Really bothered me that they just skipped over the ear being blown off thing, because she's supposed to lay there for a while and not just get up and run back, but because they made it seem like the whole capture of Rue was really quick, and it wasn't. It was slower. But moving on further down the line, the end of the Hunger Games. From here, I'm talking about when it is only 3 tributes left. Well, at this point, it would be 4-ish into 3. Cato, Katniss, and Peta. This is when the Cato's a courier. When the game makers drop the mutts into the arena. They did not make them scary enough. And they did not explain them well, and they did not traumatize you enough as they were meant to. The mutts are essentially, they had the body right. It's this like brute looking dog thing, but they had human eyes of people they knew and the past tributes, and you're supposed to see them, recognize them, and be terrified of them. And they're vicious and they're huge and they chase you down, and they were not scary enough. And the chase scene with them and the final gang is meant to be long and grueling. So when they're running from the mutts and being led to the cornucopia where they eventually meet Kato, and they're fighting Kato, the fight with Kato was pretty normal. Peta throws Kato into the mutts that are screaming and crying and have human eyes and human features, and they're recognizable as people they know. And the mutts are just eating Kato alive and tearing him apart. And you just listen to him screaming for a long time. And not only that, but the mutts actually got a hold of Peta before he finished climbing on the cornucopia, and either, I don't remember the exact detail because it's been years, either cut it really bad or like ripped part of Peta's leg off. And he's bleeding out, like he's dying. And this, yes, it's still in the point of like 2 tributes can win, and they're waiting for Kato to die. And eventually, after hours of grueling and listening to him scream and the screaming of the mutts and Peta bleeding out and Katniss bleeding because she's got no hearing in one side of her ear, and that's why like Kato's able to sneak up on her at the one point, like hit her. They're dying. They're laying on top of the cornucopia, dying. And Katniss starts begging the game makers to end the game and save Peta and win. They're like, there's literally 2 of us. There's 2 of us. You gotta end the game. You gotta end the game. And that's when she gets the berries out, because she's like, if we end up trying to kill us, then they'll finally be like, oh, fine. We can't just wait for him to die and make Katniss the winner, because she's gonna kill herself before that, and we don't really want that, because then she's a martyr. So like, she only gets the berries out because Peta's dying and she has to do something to save him. Like the movie, it was so like, we did it, honey. We're gonna be okay. No, they're not doing well. I guess I don't really need my headset on. They're not doing well, and she's bleeding out. He's bleeding out, and she's begging them to save him, and that's when she gets the berries out. And eventually the ship finally is like, okay, fine, and goes to pick him up, and he's like passed out at this point, so she doesn't know if he died. And she's screaming hysterically while he's being pulled away, and then they eventually pull her away, and she's like fighting them and being like, is he alive? Is he okay? Is he alive? And it's like a traumatizing scene because she's freaking out if he's dead or not. And then eventually it gets to the end where they're like, oh, we're so in love. I couldn't imagine, you know, the ceremony with Caesar Flickerman, and fine. The rest of it was fine, and them going back to being like, okay, well, I guess we don't need to be in love anymore. We survived the Hunger Games. Goodbye. That's when Haymitch starts teaching them, like, yeah, you're in the spotlight for the rest of your life now, so good luck with that. But they did not make the grand finale of the first Hunger Games traumatizing enough. I know that the whole thing was supposed to be traumatizing for Katniss and killing tributes and stuff like that, but that last scene was meant to be really traumatizing. She only got the berries out because she was desperate to save Peta, not just because they were like, we've changed our minds. Like, they did, but it's not just the, we decided not to. And she goes, oh, okay, well then I'll just die. And they go, oh no, maybe we don't. No, he's dying, bleeding out, not gonna survive. If they wait 5 more minutes, he'll be dead. C'est la vie, mon ami, I guess. That's my biggest complaint about the Hunger Games. Book 1 versus movie 1. Let's move on to Catching Fire. Catching Fire is when we really start to see my favorite girl, Effie, start to come back into the spotlight. Now, she's prominent in book 1, and she's a little bit out there, but you kind of like her. She's nice, she's dumb, she just loves to be part of the Capitol, she loves the ceremony. But after she gets to meet Peta and Katniss and Gale a little bit and Haymitch, she's like, okay, I'm starting to become nicer. I actually have victors and I feel privileged. And she's like, but these kids are in pain and I'm starting to see the true colors of the Hunger Games. And movie 2 is when you start to see some serious character development from Effie. She's got the greatest development in the whole trilogy, in my personal opinion. Hands down. Doing a lot of talking, so I need a drink. But she also has the best outfits. Let's hands down. I think they did a phenomenal job representing her outfits. She looks great, and you see the color changing from her clothes to her skin. So she was pale in the first movie because she had no life in her, and then she's got actual skin color because she's feeling life and she's wearing brighter colors and she's happier, but her expressions are more sour because she's realizing the pain of what the Capitol actually is. And it's one thing to watch somebody from the bottom tear down the top, but from the top to realize the top isn't good, to go to the bottom to help tear up the top. It's a ladder, and it's a really interesting dynamic, and I love seeing Effie go from being this high and mighty queen to realizing like, oh, I have questions about the authority in this world. Catching Fire is meant to be twice as traumatizing as The Hunger Games. Here are my complaints about Catching Fire movie versus the book. The Quarter Quell. This part gets me really fired up. So the book and movie start off with Katniss and Peta reuniting, them having to go on their victors parade. They end up at the Capitol where they meet Plutarch Heavensby. And he starts talking to her because she's going to be a mentor this year. And he's talking to her about the fact that this year is the Quarter Quell and everything's special. They have a special arena. And the Quarter Quell is written into the contract years ago. And so whatever is written into that contract a while ago is what is the rules of this year's Hunger Games. But it has not been opened yet or revealed. The only thing Plutarch Heavensby knows, as he is the head game maker, is what the arena will look like. So he ends up giving Katniss a pocket watch, or a watch at some point, at Coriolanus Snow's mansion during that party, because he's trying to give her a hint as a mentor that the Hunger Games arena is going to be a clock. So he gives her a pocket watch to be like, it's gonna be a clock, because he wants her as a mentor to be able to help her tribute. He doesn't know the rules of the Quarter Quell. What they do in the movie is they make it seem like Plutarch is on Coriolanus Snow's side, which he is. He's playing both sides. He's doing well. They make it seem like he has the ability to write an intense rule into the Quarter Quell. The Quarter Quell was already written. They don't know what it is until it's opened and announced that year. When it is announced, it's a shock to everyone, even Plutarch. They made it seem like Plutarch was like, I have an idea to put them back in. No. Plutarch was even surprised. He did not know Katniss was supposed to go back in. Nobody knew. So when Katniss and Peta and them all get the news that they're going back into the arena, because Katniss is the only tribute female from 12, so there's no choice for her, it's really traumatizing. And yes, I think they did a bone-chilling good job of her freaking out in the woods, screaming and crying until realizing like, oh my god, I'm going back in the games, and her having to tell Haymitch to sacrifice himself to save Peta because she doesn't want Peta to go back in. That section was great. But it's the part that they make it seem like they planned to put her back into it. No, that was just unlucky. Plutarch was under the impression that she was supposed to be a mentor. He didn't know anything else. He just wanted to give her a tip with that watch and tell her that she was supposed to be a mentor that year. So they had to very quickly plan the rebellion and how to save Katniss and how to get her out of the arena because she is the Mockingjay and they need her. Because he was like, yeah, we can do this plan while they're out of the arena and stuff. But he did not know. They did not know. They made it seem like it, and it really bothers me. Really bothers me that they do that. And just really frustrating because people get the wrong idea that they're like, well, Plutarch did not put her in. He was a good guy all along. Let's get into the arena. Arena, I thought was phenomenal. I loved the way they visualized it. It was just better than I could have put into my brain. Just the spinning clock arena, it was done so well. The wedges, it was scary, it was effed up. They actually did the mutts well with the birds, the mockingjays that time, with making them scary, with having Prim scream and Gale scream and Annie scream. Like those they made traumatizing. Like that's what the mutts are supposed to do. They're supposed to scare you. And they really got under Katniss and Finnick's skin, and I think they did a good job with those mutts. Good stuff. The arena itself was really pretty, really nice, really well done. Because they didn't touch upon it in book 1 with Katniss's ear, they didn't include that section in how she could see the force fields in the arena, so that really bothered me. It's a smaller detail, less important. The other important thing that really bothers me, that I really wish they would have touched upon in the Catching Fire, was the fact that since Katniss got reaped again and was going into the arena with trained killers and previous victors, and they do a very tiny job of, she starts doing research and starts watching all of the victors' games. She watches how each victor won their game because they have them all saved and recorded. So she goes back and starts watching all of them, and she's learning like the names of the victors and like the teeth sharpening, watching her rip the throat out. And it's really interesting information, and I wish they would have like shown it a little bit more. But in the times that she is watching those clips, she comes across Haymitches. And this is a really important moment because it helps her learn about the arena, learn about force fields, learn about why they changed the arena things, and put her faith in Haymitch because she understands who he is and why he get to the way that he was. She doesn't know how he won his games. She doesn't know anything about him other than he's a drunk. And she watches Haymitch's games, and Haymitch didn't win because he went around killing everybody. He didn't win because he was a brute. He kind of hid on the side of the arena and figured out a trick with the force field where you can't cross the boundary, but if you throw something, it will come back. It'll bounce back. And he starts doing planning with that, and he starts hanging out there until eventually it's the end game and he's being chased down and he's desperate and fighting for his life, and he ends up taking an axe from one of the tributes, and he doesn't really have a good angle, so he throws it out of the arena into the force field, and it rebounds and comes back through the force field and impales the final tribute in the head. And that teaches Katniss about using force fields, which is very significant in Catching Fire when she shoots an arrow into the force field and realizing how the force fields changed because of what Haymitch did in the games. And his games are really interesting to watch, and I really wish they would have visualized it because I'd love to see his arena and his games. It just was so captivating to learn about, and the fact that they did not touch about it and they did not give him a depth of character really bothered me, because Haymitch is really more in depth than just a drunk, and that game sequence was very important, and I wish they would have talked about it. Let's go to Mockingjay. They did split Mockingjay into 2 movies. I think it was a smart choice. It would have rushed too much information if they didn't. The first movie is a little bit, I don't want to say it's boring because I love the Hunger Games. It's a lot slower than the second one, but that's because the second one is quite literally just another Hunger Games, but in the capital. Part 1 is what I have the most issue with. Part 2, we'll talk about. I don't really have as many issues with it. Part 1, though, is the big issue. I think they did great. They represented District 13 well. They did the trauma of her knowing her district's not alive, and it was bombed, her reinventing herself, her trying to figure out how to start a rebellion from under a bunker, meeting new characters, meeting President Coin, meeting Plutarch, learning what's going on, trying to find a way to save Peta, all sorts of stuff. I think they did a great job with that. That was fine. Character building, good stuff. I have one very intense issue, and it's the very end of the movie. It's always the end of the movies that they fuck up. It's like they pay attention. They're like, we're almost done. The end of Mockingjay Part 1 gets me in a tizzy. When they're going to rescue the tributes, they need to fill the airspace to distract President Snow, and so that he doesn't think about looking at the tribute center, and so that they can get in, pull Peta and Joanna out, and Annie. And Katniss refuses to speak because she's freaking out. Valid. So Finnick speaks. And the movies don't let him speak. Oh my god, they just glaze over it. They put so much ASMR of fucking Gale's breathing and them beeping and the gas bombs, and they just don't really listen to Finnick. What Finnick is saying is capital classified secrets. It's the truth about President Snow. It's how he's poisoning himself, he's poisoning the country, he uses roses that are tainted to hide smells of things. The fact that there is no tributes or victors that are free after the Hunger Games, it depends on whether you are valued by the group or not. So where BD was the smart one, he gets sold into being a capital tech. He has to produce technology for the capital or his worth is done. Finnick is desirable, so he's sold into the sex trade. Snow still controls them after the games, and he uses him as a prostitute, and he sells him, and he's not the only one. The brother and sister duo, they get sold into things like this. He's telling secrets about what President Snow's real background is, the fact that he is not in support of the Capitol, the fact that he is adamantly against Katniss for a very important reason, which is in Ballad and Songbirds and Snakes, and you'll find out very soon. And they don't go into it. They needed to just stop the music, stop the background, and just listen to Finnick's speech, because it is very important and it's the hard truth of the whole series, and you don't really hear it or listen to it, and it's just so aggravating because that was my favorite speech in the whole series. When I read that, it took my breath away and I was in awe. And then when they put it in the movie, they said, not important. It drives me nuts! And I was so angry. I was so mad. I just couldn't deal with it, and I have such a problem with it. So I try to like calm my nerves when I watch that scene or just skip it, and it drives me nuts. Finnick is the best character. A lot of anger in my body right now thinking about this scene. Let's just move on to Mockingjay Part 2. Mockingjay Part 2 is good. We got the tributes back. Yay. They did a good job with the, I can't remember the name, the pods all over the Capitol being traumatizing and gunning people down and being gruesome and Peta snapping and going crazy. The fact that so many people get killed by the pods in her group and she just starts losing people one by one. And while it's hard to watch, it's kind of the point, because you're supposed to realize at this point, Katniss is not a hero. She's not really the person you want to root for. She kind of sucks. And she gets everybody killed because she's stupid and all she does is think about herself, and she's self-centered and gets everybody killed. And that's kind of the point. I'll never forgive Suzanne Collins for the people she kills, Finnick and Prim. But I know why she killed them. It moves the plot along. It reveals the truth about Gale, which they kind of glaze over a little bit. I mean, they tell it, but they don't really emphasize the fact that Gale is the one who killed Prim. He's not a good guy. Kind of sucks. But they do at least touch upon it, and it's fine. He's gone after that. They didn't traumatize them enough, but they didn't. They needed to be a little bit more traumatized. The only things that I have some complaints with, and they're not big ones at this point, is, again, why is it always the end of the movie? It's always the end of the movie. She walks down the parade, shoots coin instead of Snow. The people go off and end up killing Snow, and he's laughing, and he's like, that's funny and that's worth it. And he's he knows he lost. He knows what happened. He gets it. I honestly love Coriolanus Snow's character, especially after reading Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. The fact that we agreed never to lie to each other. It all makes sense. When you listen to him, he never told her a lie. He never did anything. And you start to be like, oh God, he's a fucked up person. He's terrible. But you just realize how much you were reading between the lines when you didn't need to be. He's like, I would never lie to you. I didn't kill your sister. I don't do things that are wasteful. And you're like, oh shit. And when she kills Coin, it's great. They did it really quickly, but when she pulls the Nightlock pill out, it's supposed to have a little bit more emphasis because some people kind of miss it and they're like, oh, I didn't know that it was there. You're supposed to know that she put Nightlock in there because she was planning to kill Coin and then kill herself right then and there. And they did it really quickly and it was in there and it was fine. I'm glad it was in there. And Peta's like, oh my God, she was trying to kill herself. And he catches her because he's always got his eyes on her. And he saves her, but they should have emphasized it a little bit more because she's like talks about putting it in there. She's like, this is it. And it's kind of a bit like, let's not touch upon having suicide in our movies. So I understand that. And they unfortunately did have to make a change at the end of part 2 that I'm fine with because there's really nothing they could have done about it, but it's with Plutarch and Haymitch. Unfortunately, the actor for Plutarch passed away while filming the movies. He did a phenomenal job in his role and I'll miss him terribly and I adore his work and he will be missed forever. He did pass away while filming the movies and they did CGI him in the one scene where she shoots Coin, but the scene where Haymitch comes into the room after she's done that and he reads her a letter is actually meant to be Plutarch giving her that speech, not Haymitch. And I think they did a good job with making it as a letter from Plutarch and using Haymitch to do it. And I think that translated really well. It was really emotional, especially for everybody who knew where it was really coming from and the fact that we had lost the actor. And it was really significant. And I think they did a good job dealing with the trauma. And it was really well done. I loved seeing Effie in this movie. She changed from, again, those bright colors and pale skin to being a rebel leader in army. She eventually gets her colors back. She's happy. Her and Haymitch kiss and she's like, okay, I see where things are wrong and she wants to rebuild things for the better. And she's a really well-written character and I think her depth is phenomenal and she was played super well. A lot of people have a huge hatred for the ending of part 2 where she's just in a field talking to her babies. They're like, I'm so stupid. I mean, the CGI for her and Peta were not great to make them look older. It was kind of not the best makeup they could have done, but it's a fantasy dystopian book. Get over it. And they're like, I didn't like the fact that she just had a baby. And I'm like, her and Peta lived out there alone for years. Yeah, they just had kids. And it's open-ended because she doesn't want to go back to the capital. She's got so much fucking trauma. She doesn't want to lead anything. She doesn't want to be around people. She's just staying in the place she grew up, hunting, being with the guy she loves, and that's it. And I was fine with it. I'm okay with an open-ended thing because I like to imagine things. I was fine with it. Again, I don't like the CGI they did, but that's whatever. Real quick though, I want to talk about the real or not real thing. I love the real or not real thing. I think they didn't utilize it enough. When Peta's not sure whether his memories are tainted with or if they're real and he starts asking questions, he says real or not real. They should have used it a little bit more, but I do love that they incorporated it because that part was always so emotional to me. In the end of the movie where he's like, do you love me, real or not real? And she says real. And I love that scene. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love the real or not real thing. And that's I'm just really passionate about the Hunger Games. And I really cannot wait for Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes for you guys to learn. If you haven't read it yet or haven't seen the trailer, check it out. If you haven't seen the movie, we will when you see the movie. Figuring out who Coriolanus Snow is, why he's the way that he is, who Katniss Everdeen is, learning about Lucy Baird, learning about Maud Ivory. This book is so good. And so far the trailer just looks like they aged it backwards because with the Hunger Games we know it's more modern technology, more frilly, but this is way before this. This is the 10th Hunger Games where these are the 74th, 75th, 76th. So it's a long time in between these eras. And this explains why it's a party. Why do people watch the Hunger Games? Why do they bet on them? Why do they cheer? Where do the care packages come from? Why are there sponsors? All covered in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So please get that book read before you see the movie, because it's going to be fantastic. I hope you guys liked this video. I'm very passionate about the Hunger Games. If you want me to talk about more things I'm passionate about, check them out. I love you guys. Thank you so much for getting that video viral. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video. But for now, I think I'm gonna clock out. See you soon.